Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
My voice trembled as I gripped the sides of the podium, the hot stage lights blinding me. "You're all so worried about this," I said, my voice booming unnaturally through the auditorium speakers. I gestured down at my own legs, at the navy blue pleated skirt and the shockingly bright pink tights stretched over them. "You're worried it's making us soft or confused." The crowd of angry parents stared back, a sea of hostile, disbelieving faces. I could see my own father in the third row, his mouth agape. But what's really confusing? I pressed on, a strange, hot anger overriding my fear. It's being told that you can only be one thing, that what you wear is more important than who you are. The silence in the room was absolute, a thick, heavy blanket of tension. Standing on that stage, in that ridiculous, humiliating, and somehow empowering uniform, I wasn't the same person I had been just 1 month earlier. To understand how I got there, you have to understand the person I was before. My name is Sam, and until my sophomore year, my life was aggressively, predictably normal. I was 18. I had a small circle of friends, decent grades, and a crush on a girl named Maya who sat 2 rows ahead of me in chemistry and had no idea I existed. My biggest worry was a pop quiz I hadn't studied for. Life was simple. Life was beige. Then came the first day of school, and Principal Croft decided to paint it all a shocking, horrifying shade of pink. We were all packed into the auditorium, the air thick with the smell of fresh floor wax and teenage anxiety. It was the standard back-to-school assembly. "Welcome back. Here are the rules. Don't run in the halls. Go Team Wildcats." I was half asleep, doodling in my notebook, when Principal Croft tapped the microphone. The resulting feedback screech made everyone wince. "Good morning, students," she said, her voice crisp and unwavering. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, always dressed in sharp, angular suits. She looked like she could calculate the square root of a hurricane. "I trust you all had a restful summer. This year at Northwood High, we will be implementing a new initiative. An experiment in empathy, discipline, and social conditioning." A murmur rippled through the crowd. My friend Josh, a lanky guy who lived for basketball, nudged me. "Social what? Is she going to make us do trust falls?" I shrugged, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Principal Croft never used words like initiative unless it meant more homework or longer school days. She let the silence hang for a moment before dropping the bomb. Effective immediately, Principal Croft continued, her voice cutting through the whispers. "The student dress code is being amended. All female students will continue to adhere to the existing guidelines. However, all male students will be required to wear the new standard issue uniform." She paused for dramatic effect, and a teacher wheeled out a mannequin from behind the curtain. It was dressed in our school's standard white polo shirt, but below the waist, it was a nightmare. A short, pleated navy blue skirt. And underneath that, a pair of eye-searingly bright pink tights. The mannequin's feet were tucked into black, low-heeled Mary Jane shoes. The auditorium was silent for a full 3 seconds. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a car crash when your brain is trying to process something it can't believe it just saw. Then, chaos erupted. It started as a low rumble of laughter and disbelief, then swelled into a roar of outrage. "You can't be serious," someone yelled from the back. "Is this a joke?" shouted a jock from the football team. Principal Croft raised a hand, and the noise died down, replaced by a tense, angry hum. "This is not a joke," she stated, her voice like glass. "This new uniform is mandatory. It is designed to foster a sense of humility, to challenge your preconceived notions of masculinity, and to teach you to walk in another's shoes. Quite literally. You will learn empathy. You will learn discipline." My mind was reeling. A skirt. Pink tights. Mary Jane's. I glanced at Josh. His jaw was on the floor. I looked over toward Maya's section. I could see her talking with her friends, a look of utter bewilderment on her face. The thought of her seeing me, seeing any of us, in that getup made my entire body flush with heat. "Uniforms will be distributed during homeroom," the principal continued, as if she hadn't just declared war on every guy in the school. Any student not in proper uniform by tomorrow morning will be sent home. A second infraction will result in suspension. A third will result in expulsion. There will be no exceptions. Welcome to a new era at Northwood High. The assembly was dismissed. We shuffled out of the auditorium like a zombie horde, not with groans, but with a chorus of furious, confused whispers. "My dad's going to sue the school," a guy named Mark muttered. "I'm transferring," another said. Josh just kept shaking his head. "This has to be illegal, right? Like a violation of our civil rights or something." I didn't say anything. I was too busy picturing it. Me, Sam, the quiet, invisible guy, forced to wear a short skirt and pink tights. It felt like a fever dream. A horrible, humiliating, neon pink fever dream. Back in homeroom, the nightmare became tangible. Our teacher, Mr. Collins, looked as uncomfortable as we did as he handed out sealed plastic bags. Each one contained the neatly folded skirt, a pair of shrink-wrapped pink tights, and the shiny black Mary Janes. On the bag was a label with my name on it. It felt less like a uniform and more like a bag of evidence from a crime scene. I clutched it to my chest and walked home in a daze. The beige simplicity of my life was over. Tomorrow, I would have to walk into school dressed like a doll, and my world would never be the same. That evening, the uniform sat on my bed like a venomous creature. The plastic bag crinkled every time I so much as breathed near it. My mom had seen it and, after a long, confused phone call with another parent, just shook her head and said, "Well, a rule's a rule, I guess. At least you won't have to decide what to wear." She was trying to be helpful. It wasn't. After putting it off for hours, I finally decided I had to face the music. I had to at least try it on to prepare myself for the public humiliation that awaited me. I locked my bedroom door, took a deep breath, and tore open the plastic. The material of the skirt was a coarse, starchy polyester. It felt durable and industrial. But it was the tights that truly horrified me. They were a shade of pink so vibrant it almost seemed to hum. I held them up. They were thin, silky, and impossibly long. I'd never touched anything like it. The fabric felt cool and unnervingly smooth against my calloused fingertips. My clothes were jeans, hoodies, t-shirts, cotton, denim, fleece. This felt alien. First, I pulled off my jeans and boxers. Standing there in my t-shirt, I took one of the silky legs of the tights and tried to put my foot in. It was like trying to stuff a sausage into a straw. The material clung to my leg hair, catching and pulling. It was a clumsy, awkward struggle. I nearly lost my balance twice. Finally, I managed to get them on, pulling the elastic waistband up to my hips. The sensation was bizarre. It was a feeling of complete and total containment. The thin nylon was stretched taut over my calves, my knees, my thighs. Every muscle was suddenly defined, on display. It was cool against my skin, but also felt incredibly fragile, like a single wrong move could rip them. I felt a strange mix of being constricted and exposed at the same time. I couldn't hide in these. There was no baggy fabric to disappear into. This was just my legs, but pink. Next was the skirt. I stepped into it and pulled it up. It settled around my waist, the pleats flaring out. It was short, way shorter than I'd imagined. It barely reached mid-thigh. I took a step, and the fabric swished around my legs, the hem brushing against the smooth nylon of the tights. The feeling was so foreign I almost laughed. It felt absurd. I stood in front of the full-length mirror on my closet door and I stared. It wasn't me. It couldn't be. The person in the mirror had my face, my messy brown hair, my lanky frame. But from the waist down, it was a stranger. A ridiculous, clownish stranger with skinny, hairy legs encased in Pepto-Bismol pink. The skirt looked like a lampshade. The harsh line where my pale, hairy thighs met the top of the tights was particularly grotesque. A wave of hot shame washed over me, so intense it made my ears ring. My stomach twisted. "I can't do this," I whispered to my reflection. "I can't." My reflection just stared back, looking as lost and horrified as I felt. I imagined walking down the school hallway. The stares, the pointing, the laughter. I could already hear the names they would call me. The image of Maya, Her pretty face wrinkling in confusion and maybe even disgust flashed in my mind. It was a physical pain, a punch to the gut. I took another look. The way the light caught the sheen of the nylon made my legs look weirdly shapely. I flexed my calf muscle and the pink fabric stretched, highlighting the curve. It was fascinating in a horrifying way. I tried walking. The skirt swayed with a life of its own. I felt a breeze in places a breeze had never been. It was unsettling. Then I put on the shoes, the Mary Janes. They were patent leather and squeaked when I walked. The low, chunky heel made a soft but distinct click-clack on my hardwood floor. It was a sound I associated with teachers and my grandma. It was not a sound a 16-year-old boy was supposed to make. Each click was a small announcement of my humiliation. Click. I'm a boy in a skirt. Clack. Look at my stupid pink legs. Click. Clack. I hate my life. I spent maybe 10 minutes in that outfit, walking back and forth, staring at myself from every angle, my gut churning with a toxic cocktail of fear and self-loathing. This wasn't an experiment in empathy. This was a forced march into social suicide. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I tore the clothes off, the skirt hitting the floor with a soft thump, the tights peeling off my skin with a sticky, synthetic sound. I threw them into a pile in the darkest corner of my room, as if hiding them would make them disappear. I put my old, familiar jeans back on. The rough denim was a comforting weight against my skin. But the feeling lingered. The phantom sensation of the smooth tights, the swish of the skirt, the tightness of the waistband. I had a test tomorrow. Not in chemistry or history. It was a test of survival, and I was pretty sure I was going to fail. Walking to school the next morning was the longest walk of my life. Every step was a fresh wave of misery. The early morning air, which usually felt crisp and refreshing, felt cold and invasive on my bare thighs between the hem of the skirt and the top of my socks. I had refused to wear the tights just yet, stuffing them in my backpack as a last resort. I had pulled on a pair of my old tube socks, hoping it would somehow make it less feminine. It didn't. It just looked weirder. The skirt swished around me, a constant rustling reminder of my predicament. I kept my head down, my hoodie pulled up, my hands jammed in my pockets, but there was no hiding. I felt like I was walking around with a giant neon sign strapped to my back that read, "Look at the idiot in the skirt." The world seemed to have turned into a sea of eyes. A woman walking her dog did a double take. A construction worker across the street paused, a smirk spreading across his face. I could feel their gazes on me like physical objects, heavy and sharp. My face was burning, a permanent, painful blush that started at my neck and spread to the tips of my ears. When I got closer to school, it got worse. A whole army of us was converging on the entrance. A miserable parade of pleated skirts and awkward gaits. Some guys tried to own it, walking with a defiant swagger. Others, like me, tried to shrink into themselves, to become invisible. It wasn't working. We were all painfully, ridiculously visible. Josh was waiting for me by the bike racks. He was wearing the full uniform, pink tights and all. He looked as miserable as I felt. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," he said, his voice a low groan. He kept tugging at the hem of his skirt. My dad called the school board. They said Croft has full autonomy over disciplinary and dress code matters. It's insane. "Did you see Mark?" I asked, nodding towards a group of jocks standing awkwardly by the door. Mark, their self-proclaimed leader, had tried to subvert the rule by wearing baggy basketball shorts under his skirt. It just made him look bulky and even more foolish. A teacher was already walking over to him, pointing at his shorts and shaking her head. Defeated, Mark trudged toward the bathroom, presumably to take them off. The first bell rang, a shrill command to enter the building and face our doom. We walked into the main hall, and it was pure chaos. It was a visual cacophony of navy blue, white, and blinding pink. The sound was a low hum of laughter, both nervous and mocking. The girls didn't seem to know how to react. Some were trying very hard not to stare, their eyes wide. Others were giggling behind their hands. A few just looked at us with pity. I saw Maya. She was by her locker, talking to a friend. Her eyes scanned the hall, and for a terrifying second, they locked with mine. I saw a flicker of surprise. then something else I couldn't read. I quickly looked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt my face get even hotter, which I hadn't thought was possible. Then she walked over. My entire nervous system went into red alert. This was it, the moment of supreme judgment. "Hey, Sam," she said. Her voice was normal. Not mocking, not dripping with pity, just normal. Hey, Maya," I managed to squeak out, my voice an octave higher than usual. I was intensely focused on a scuff mark on the floor, unable to meet her gaze. She was silent for a second. I braced myself. Here comes the "why are you wearing a skirt?" or the pitying "oh, you poor thing." Instead, she gave a small, soft laugh. "You know," she said, a smile in her voice, "that shade of pink is actually kind of cute on you." I finally dared to look up. She was smiling. A genuine, gentle smile. There was no mockery in her eyes, just a kind of amused warmth. My brain short-circuited. Cute? Me? In this? I was so prepared for ridicule that kindness felt like a foreign language. I couldn't form a sentence. All I could do was stand there, my mouth slightly open, my face the color of a ripe tomato. She must have seen my panic, because her smile softened. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "It's just clothes. It's weird, but it's just clothes." She gave a little wave and headed to her class. I stood there for a long moment after she left, replaying her words in my head. It's just clothes. For the first time all day, the crushing weight of humiliation lifted. Just a fraction. It was still horrible. It was still embarrassing. But Maya's small act of kindness was like a tiny pinprick of light in a very dark, very pink room. Maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. The first few days were a blur of awkward adjustments and constant, low-grade anxiety. Sitting down in class became a complex maneuver. You had to consciously smooth the skirt under you to avoid sitting on a wrinkled bunch of polyester. Every time I stood up, I had a paranoid fear that the skirt was tucked into my waistband or something. Going upstairs felt like a public performance. I'd walk sideways, my back against the wall, holding my books in front of me like a shield. The bathrooms were another new circle of hell. The school had, in its infinite wisdom, designated all restrooms as gender-neutral to fully commit to the experience. The first time I walked in and saw girls washing their hands and checking their makeup, I turned right around and walked out. I learned to strategically dehydrate myself to avoid the whole situation. Gym class was the absolute worst. Our coach, a gruff ex-Marine named Coach Davies, was unsympathetic. "I don't care if you're wearing a tutu and a tiara," he boomed on the first day. "You will give me 20 laps." Running in a skirt is an experience I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The constant flapping, the fear of it flying up, the way the fabric chafed against my legs. It was a new level of indignity. We were all a clumsy, flailing mess of pink and navy blue. But a funny thing happened during that first gym class. After the initial wave of supreme embarrassment, we were all so focused on not tripping over our own feet or flashing the entire class that we kind of forgot to be embarrassed of each other. We were all in the same ridiculous, swishy-skirted boat. There was a weird, unspoken camaraderie in our shared misery. Slowly, I started noticing things, little details about this new uniform that I hadn't expected. After my initial defiance, I had given in and started wearing the pink tights. The first time I wore them for a full day, I was shocked to realize that they were actually kind of comfortable. My jeans were always stiff and restrictive. The tights were flexible. They moved with me. On a surprisingly warm autumn day, they were cooler than denim. I hated myself for thinking it, but there was a practical upside to this sartorial prison. I wasn't the only one adapting. The student body, resilient as always, began to find ways to cope. Some guys, like the artsy kids, started treating it like a fashion statement. They'd pair the uniform with combat boots or add pins to their skirts. One guy in my English class, a quiet punk rocker named Finn, started wearing fishnet stockings over his pink tights. It was a small act of rebellion, a way of taking control of the narrative. Even Josh, after a week of constant complaining, found a silver lining. "You know," he said during lunch, stretching his long legs out under the table, "I have way more range of motion for my jump shot in this thing. It's weird. But the biggest change was happening inside me. Maya's comment had been a catalyst. I started noticing that not everyone was laughing. Sure, the bullies were still bullies. Mark and his cronies would make snide remarks, calling us princess or skirt boy, but most people, especially the girls, just got used to it. We became part of the school's new, weird landscape. One afternoon, I was struggling with a chemistry equation in the library. I had my legs crossed, a habit I was developing to keep the skirt in place, and was chewing on the end of my pen. "It's the molar mass," a voice said beside me. "You forgot to convert to moles first." It was Maya. She sat down in the chair next to me, her own textbook open. She pointed to a line in my notes. "You have the formula right, you just skipped a step." "Oh, right," I said, feeling stupid. "Thanks." "No problem," she said, smiling. "This chapter is brutal." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both working on our own problems. I was acutely aware of the swish of my skirt every time I shifted in my chair. I was sure she was too. Does it ever stop feeling weird?" I asked quietly, not looking at her. She glanced at me, then at my skirt, then back at my face. "Does what?" "This," I said, gesturing vaguely at my outfit. "Wearing this." She thought for a moment. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I guess I'm used to wearing skirts. But if they made all the girls wear, like, heavy overalls and steel-toed boots every day, I'd probably feel weird for a long time." She tapped her chin with her pen. "But I think I'd get used to it." "You kind of just do." Her comparison was so simple, yet it hit me with surprising force. "You kind of just do." I had been so wrapped up in the idea of this being a punishment, an attack on my masculinity, that I hadn't considered it from any other angle. It was a uniform, a strange, uncomfortable, and often humiliating uniform, but a uniform nonetheless. That night, for the first time, I didn't just throw the uniform in a pile. I actually hung the skirt up in my closet. As I was smoothing out the pleats, my fingers brushed against the fabric, and a strange thought popped into my head. I walked over to my mirror and looked at myself. The reflection was still jarring, but the intense self-loathing was gone. It was replaced by a kind of weary resignation, tinged with a tiny, unfamiliar spark of curiosity. I did a slow spin, watching the way the pleats fanned out and settled back down. The movement was fluid, graceful in a way my usual clunky movements weren't. I looked at my legs in the pink tights. They still looked skinny and out of place, but Maya's word echoed in my mind. Cute. I didn't see cute. I just saw me in a skirt. It was a fact, like the sky being blue or gravity being real. The shame was still there, a low hum in the background of my thoughts. But it was no longer the only thing I felt. Something else was taking root. A grudging acceptance. And I had a feeling that this was only the beginning. The mystery behind Principal Croft's initiative was the biggest source of gossip in the school. Theories ranged from the plausible, "She lost a bet," to the insane, "She's part of a secret government mind control experiment." The truth, as it often is, was far more personal and complicated. And Maya and I stumbled upon it completely by accident. We were assigned a history project on the evolution of Northwood High, the last 20 years. This meant we had to dig through the school archives, a dusty, forgotten room in the basement that smelled of old paper and neglect. "I think I'm going to get a lung disease down here," Maya said, wiping a layer of grime off a stack of old yearbooks. She was wearing jeans and a band t-shirt, and I felt a pang of envy for the simple comfort of her clothes. I, of course, was in my full uniform, the pink of my tights looking grotesquely cheerful in the dim, flickering fluorescent light. I had to be careful not to snag them on the sharp corners of the metal filing cabinets. "Maybe we'll find some ancient treasure," I joked, pulling open a heavy drawer labeled Student Records 1995 to 2000. We spent an hour sifting through old photos, laughing at the terrible 90s fashion and the goofy pictures of our current teachers when they were younger. It was fun, easy. Being with Maya was becoming less of a nerve-wracking ordeal and more of the highlight of my day. She treated me like a person, not a boy in a skirt. Then I found a different kind of file. It wasn't a student record. It was a thick manila folder labeled Croft, Research and Proposals. My curiosity piqued. I opened it. Inside were not school documents, but academic papers and psychological journals. The name on them was Dr. Eleanor Croft, Ph.D. Principal Croft was a doctor, a psychologist. The papers were dense and full of academic jargon, but the titles told a story: the role of enforced uniformity in reducing clique-based aggression, challenging gender constructs in adolescent environments, empathy induction through mandated role reversal. "Maya, you have to see this," I whispered. She came over and peered at the documents. Her eyes widened. "She's a psychologist. All this is a real experiment." We dug deeper. Tucked in the back of the folder was a thin, separate file. It contained a series of incident reports and a faded newspaper clipping from about 10 years ago. The headline read, "Local teen takes own life after vicious bullying." The story was about a boy from our school, a freshman named Daniel Green. He was described as a quiet, gentle kid who loved art and theater. He was relentlessly bullied for not being manly enough. They mocked his voice, the way he walked, his interests. The bullying became so unbearable that he gave up. My hands felt cold. This wasn't just an academic exercise for Principal Croft. It was personal. Attached to the clipping was a handwritten note. It was a proposal written by a much younger Eleanor Croft than a guidance counselor at the school. She had proposed a radical anti-bullying program, one that would force students to confront their prejudices head-on. The school board at the time had rejected it as being too extreme. "Oh my God," Maya breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's why she did it. This whole skirt thing, it's for him. For Daniel." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The stern demeanor, the unwavering commitment to the rule, the talk of empathy and discipline. Principal Croft wasn't a tyrant. She was a woman on a mission, a decade-old mission to prevent another tragedy like Daniel Green's. She was trying to build a world where a boy could be gentle without being a target. She was trying to tear down the very walls that had closed in on that poor kid. The skirt I was wearing suddenly felt different, heavier. It wasn't just a piece of polyester anymore. It was a symbol, a shield, a weapon against the kind of casual cruelty that could destroy a person. My own shame felt so small and selfish in that moment. I was embarrassed about what people thought of me, while a kid my age had lost his life because of it. My struggle was about discomfort. His was about survival. We sat there in the dusty silence of the archive room, the weight of our discovery settling over us. The pink tights on my legs no longer felt ridiculous. They felt significant. This bizarre, humiliating, uncomfortable experience had a purpose. A painful, deeply human purpose. "We can't tell anyone," I said finally, carefully placing the files back in the folder. "If people knew, especially the parents, they'd twist it," Maya finished, understanding completely. "They'd say she was using us, experimenting on us without consent. They wouldn't see the reason behind it." We left the archives that day with a secret that changed everything. The pink tights rule wasn't just a rule anymore. It was a legacy. And whether I liked it or not, I was a part of it. The walk home felt different. The stares from strangers didn't sting as much. I wasn't just a boy in a skirt. I was part of an experiment in empathy. And for the first time, I felt a strange, quiet sense of pride. The quiet acceptance within the school walls was a fragile bubble, and we all knew it was only a matter of time before it burst. The outside world, particularly the parents, was not adapting as well as the students. Rumors had been swirling for weeks, but it all came to a head when a flyer appeared in our mailboxes. "Concerned parents of Northwood High, town hall meeting." It was a call to arms. The agenda was simple: demand the immediate repeal of the unconscionable and psychologically damaging mandatory male dress code. My dad read it at the dinner table, his brow furrowed. "It's about time," he grumbled. "This whole thing is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Forcing boys to dress like that. It's not right." "It's just clothes, Dad," I said, poking at my mashed potatoes. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. A month ago, I would have been leading the charge with him. He looked at me surprised. "Just clothes, Sam? You hated it. You said it was humiliating." "I did," I admitted. "I mean, it still is sometimes. But it's also not that big of a deal anymore. We're all used to it." He just shook his head, unconvinced. "We'll see what happens at this meeting. Croft has gone too far this time." The night of the meeting, the school auditorium was even more packed than it was on the first day of school. This time, the crowd was older, angrier. The air crackled with parental outrage. Maya and I sat near the back with Josh and a few other kids who, for various reasons, had come around to the rule or at least weren't actively fighting it. Mark's dad, a large, red-faced man who looked like he gargled with gravel, was the one leading the charge. He stood at a podium, his voice booming. "This is an outrage. Principal Croft is conducting a bizarre social experiment on our sons. She is confusing them, humiliating them, and turning our school into a laughingstock." A chorus of angry "yes, and that's right," echoed through the room. "My son is a football player. He's supposed to be tough." "How's he supposed to be tough when you're forcing him to wear a skirt and pink tights? You are eroding their masculinity." Principal Croft stood at the side of the stage, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. She let him and several other parents vent their fury, their words a torrent of fear and prejudice. They talked about tradition, about propriety, about how boys should be boys and girls should be girls. I looked at Maya. She was staring at Principal Croft, her expression worried. We both knew the real reason, the story of Daniel Green, but we also knew that revealing it here would just add fuel to the fire. They would accuse her of emotional manipulation. Finally, Principal Croft stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent. "I understand your concerns," she began, her voice calm and steady. "I understand that this is a radical departure from the norm. But I ask you to consider the purpose. The purpose is not to humiliate. It is to teach empathy. It is to break down the rigid boxes we put our children in. Boxes that can be suffocating." "It's child abuse," someone yelled. The room erupted again. It was a losing battle. They weren't listening. They were just shouting. I felt a surge of something hot and unfamiliar in my chest. It was anger, not at the uniform, but at them. At these adults who were so convinced they knew what was best, who were so terrified of anything different. I thought of Daniel Green. I thought of how they were using the same toxic ideas about what a boy should be that had led to his death. I looked at my own legs, at the pink tights stretched over them. This uniform had caused me so much shame. But it had also taught me something. It had forced me to see past the surface. It had shown me that kindness from a person like Maya mattered more than taunts from a person like Mark. Before I even knew what I was doing, I was on my feet. "Sam, what are you doing?" Josh hissed, grabbing my arm. I shook him off and started walking toward the stage. A path cleared for me, people turning to stare at the boy in the skirt and pink tights walking purposefully toward the microphone. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I kept walking. I stepped onto the stage and stood next to Principal Croft. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her usually stoic eyes. I turned to the crowd of angry parents. I could see my dad in the third row, his mouth agape. I took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. My voice trembled at first. "Hi, my name is Sam. I'm a sophomore here." I paused, my eyes scanning the sea of hostile faces. When Principal Croft announced this rule, I hated it. I think every guy here did. I was so embarrassed. I was terrified of what you all would think, of what everyone would think. I saw some heads nodding in agreement. I had their attention. "The first day was one of the worst days of my life," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "I felt like a freak. I just wanted to be invisible. But then a funny thing happened. We all just kept going to school. We went to class. We did our homework. We ran laps in gym." A few kids in the audience chuckled softly. And after a while, it just became normal. "This skirt," I said, grabbing a handful of the pleated fabric, "and these ridiculous pink tights, they stopped being a costume. They just became our uniform." And I realized something. "You're all so worried about this," I gestured to my outfit, "about what it looks like. You're worried it's making us soft or confused." I took a breath and looked directly at Mark's dad. "But what's really confusing? What's really damaging? It's being told that you can only be one thing. It's being told that if you're a boy, you have to be tough, that you can't be gentle or artistic or quiet. It's being told that what you wear is more important than who you are. The room was completely silent now. My whole life I've worn jeans and t-shirts, and in them, I was shy and I was scared of what people thought of me. Now I'm standing here in a skirt and pink tights in front of all of you, and I'm not scared. The realization hit me as I said it. It was true. I wasn't scared. This uniform didn't make me weaker. It forced me to be stronger. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering my final point. Why is it perfectly fine for a girl to wear pants and a hoodie, and no one says she's confusing her gender? We call it practical. We call it comfortable. But the second a boy wears a skirt, it's a crisis. Why? It's just clothes. It's just fabric. It doesn't change who we are. It just changes how you see us. And maybe that's the whole point. I stepped back from the microphone, my body trembling with adrenaline. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. Then, in the back, someone started clapping. It was Maya. Then Josh joined in. A few other students followed. It wasn't a roar of applause, but it was enough. It was a start. I looked at Principal Croft. For the first time, I saw her mask crack, just for a second. And underneath, there was a look of profound, weary gratitude. The aftermath of the town hall meeting was not the dramatic, movie-ending victory I might have hoped for. Life is messier than that. But something had definitely shifted. My speech, amplified by a few other students who spoke up after me, hadn't magically convinced all the angry parents, but it had planted a seed of doubt. It had reframed the conversation. In the end, a compromise was reached. The school board, under pressure from the more vocal parents, but also swayed by the student testimonials, amended the rule. The uniform was no longer mandatory. It was now optional. Boys could choose to wear the traditional pants and polo, or they could opt for the skirt and tights uniform. The choice was ours. The next Monday morning felt like the first day of school all over again, but with a new kind of tension. It was a day of decision. I stood in front of my closet, looking at the two options hanging side by side, my old, familiar khaki pants and the navy blue pleated skirt. Part of me, the part that still craved invisibility, screamed to just put on the pants, end the experiment, go back to being beige. It would be so much easier. No more stairs, no more complicated bathroom logistics, no more carefully sitting down. But then I thought about my speech. I thought about the feeling of standing on that stage, of finally saying what I truly believed. I thought about Maya's smile and the grudging respect in Josh's eyes. I thought about the surprising comfort of the tights and the strange freedom of the skirt. Going back to pants felt less like a relief and more like a retreat. A surrender. I took a deep breath, grabbed the skirt and the pink tights, and put them on. Walking into school that day was fascinating. It was like watching the results of a secret ballot. I'd say about 2/3 of the guys had gone back to pants. They walked with a palpable sense of relief, a thank God that's over energy. Mark and his crew were, of course, decked out in the baggiest pants they could find, practically swaggering with renewed machismo. But then there was the other third. Finn, the punk rock kid, was still in his skirt, this time with ripped black tights underneath the pink ones. A couple of the theater kids had treated it like a costume choice, walking with a dramatic flair. And Josh was wearing the skirt. "What?" he said when he saw me staring. "I told you, my range of motion is better in this thing. Tryouts are next week. I need every advantage I can get." He said it with a shrug, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. The most surprising thing was the number of guys who, like me, just seemed to choose it for no other reason than they wanted to. It was comfortable. It was easy. It was, after weeks of forced acclimatization, simply their uniform. The hallways were a new kind of normal, a mix of pants and skirts. The choice itself had diffused the power of the statement. When it was mandatory, it was a symbol of oppression. Now that it was a choice, it was just a choice, a preference, like choosing a blue shirt over a red one. My relationship with Maya blossomed in the wake of the meeting. Our friendship, solidified by a shared secret, grew into a genuine connection. One afternoon, we were sitting on a bench in the park. "You were really brave, you know," she said, her head tilted as she looked at me. "At the meeting." "I don't know about brave," I mumbled, adjusting the pleats of my skirt. "I was terrified." I just had to say something. That's what being brave is, Sam, she said softly. Being terrified and doing it anyway. She reached out and lightly brushed a piece of lint off my pink tights-clad knee. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a jolt through me. I'm glad you did. A few weeks later was the fall formal. I asked Maya to go with me, my heart pounding, and she said yes. When the night came, I stood in front of my mirror dressed in a nice button-down shirt and dress pants. I looked fine, normal, but it felt wrong. It felt like I was wearing a costume. On a whim, I took off the pants and put on my school skirt. I swapped the pink tights for a new pair of plain black ones. It felt better. It felt like me. When I picked Maya up, she opened the door, her eyes widening slightly when she saw my outfit. She looked beautiful in a simple dark green dress. You're wearing the skirt, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. Is that okay? I asked, suddenly nervous. It's perfect, she said. And it was. We danced. We laughed. I didn't feel weird or out of place. I just felt like Sam at a dance with a girl I really liked. As the last slow song played, Maya rested her head on my shoulder. You know, she whispered, I was wrong about what I said that first day. When I said the pink was cute on you. Oh, I said, my heart sinking a little. Black is definitely more your color, she finished, squeezing my hand. I looked down at our joined hands, at the girls smiling up at me, at the crowd of students around us, some in dresses, some in suits, some in a mix of everything in between. The rigid lines had been blurred. The boxes had been broken. And in their place was something much more interesting, something much more free. From a shadowed corner of the gymnasium, hidden behind the bleachers, Principal Croft watched the dance floor. She saw Sam and Maya smiling. She saw Josh showing off a dance move, his skirt twirling. She saw a school that looked different than it had 3 months ago, more colorful, more accepting. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She adjusted her sharp blazer and turned to walk away, her own click-clack heels echoing softly in the hall. Phase 1, she whispered to the empty corridor, complete.